A red beacon flares to life on the roof of the chateau. Slicing through the whirling clouds high above, Vor notes the colored signal and observes his home as the electromagnetic blast signals his challenger's end. An abrupt series of flashes and the thunder of an explosion rock the other side of the chateau. The landing bay. Vor sighs with resignation at this senseless loss of life. Idiot human. An iridescent shimmer flows across Vor's anomalous polyhedra as he severs his alignment from the planet's magnetic field to enter into a dive. With his orbiting weapons array in tow, Vor stabilizes and guides his descent to fold into a wide, arcade-lined atrium at the edge of his floating Gothic complex. Piercing the projected vacuum barrier under a high arch between thick, stony columns, Vor angles into the chateau proper. He glides morosely through its high-ceilinged, barrel-vaulted rooms. The winds of Tissan's Eye whip through the halls. He coasts over to the gaping space left by the ejected room, sends a cyberpulse to the sensor over the door, and seals the corridor. The air stills with a ringing silence. Vor turns away and sends a series of short, almost anxious queries to his orbiting command cube to check on the statuses of his 33 other homes. He gets 10 responses. Troublesome human. Vor is disturbed, but not overly upset about the destruction of most of his residences. During his long career as a military strategist, he has learned to accept loss as a consequence of his choices. So he lost a few homes. He can always rebuild. He has the time, and money is no issue. Also, this human, Sayat Iardo, while fairly thorough in its research, still missed more than several of his lesser-known domiciles. That is a positive. Losing scores of his staff, however, is disconcerting. He can certainly hire more servitors, he thinks coldly, but he always tires of the interviewing process quickly. The conspicuous giant folds with irritation at the thought. Vor glides on. His brood is safe, of course, as are his many courtesans, isolated as they are from the galaxy at large, in widely dispersed Gixin-only systems. Vor indulges himself with nostalgic thoughts of his mates and his young for a brief time. He will have to make a round of visits to them all soon, he muses. Then he stops abruptly in midair, chuckles cynically to himself, chuckles at how old and soft he's become, growing attached to other Gixin-Jail and replaceable things, losing his edge. He notices his surroundings again, brings his mind back to the task of rebuilding his other chateaus, tells himself that having many homes is about self-preservation and not about pride or possessing things or flaunting wealth, though perhaps he'll scout out a few new planets to build on. That will be interesting. And it will further confound any antagonists to come. Vor is under no illusions that this Iardo is the last of them. He thinks for a beat. He'll have to re-employ that clever little engineer to design and install RDMs in his new homes as well. Yes, he will attend to that first. Involving the creature at the beginning of the project will yield the best results. With a cyberpulse to open a channel on his orbiting command cube, Vor calls to his Lenishay servitor, Ging, and orders the creature to use a secure line to notify Iraya Chiolem of his imminent arrival. Afterwards, he orders Ging to ready the Fakal's Shadow, Vor's ship, for a long voyage. The huge Gixin changes his course through the tall, echoing halls of the chateau to glide toward his equipment room and prepare for the trip, reflecting with some perturbation on the day's events. Petty little beings like this Iardo are always going out of their way to find him to settle some old grudge or bitterness they won't let go of, despite his compassionate acts. And each one killed in self-defense leaves Vor more inclined to agree with the argument that he and the rest of his kind have become too lenient with all these sub-Gixin slugs, too permissive. What if this Iardo had found its way unnoticed into a Gixin-only system, found one of his broods? Vor can't shake the thought and the fear it harbors. This bothers him. He stops. Hovering above the threshold of his equipment room, he focuses a few eyes on his command cube orbiting close by. A cyberpulse reactivates the microphone. Ging, he calls. An iridescent flash of curiosity cascades across Vor's evanescent accretion. Report. Dead air. The Lenache never fails to acknowledge an order immediately. Vor turns and angles toward the chateau's landing bay. Demolitions is an exacting skill, and for as talented as Ging is in this regard, it isn't impossible to believe that the creature slipped up somehow and got himself killed in the process. Ging had been blown apart. Fried scales and small burned chunks of the creature lie scattered all about the landing platform. The creature's main mass lay fairly distant from the exploded ship, but without a bloody skid or smear leading away from the vehicle to Ging's body, a thing one would expect to see if the scaly Lenache, once felled, had been pushed away by the force of an explosion. Vor increases his alignment with the planet's magnetic field and folds up into the air. From a higher vantage point, the circumstances of Ging's death become clear. The human, Iardo, had clearly programmed the ship to fire on any unauthorized approach. Scattered splatters of drying blood lay all around the platform as evidence. Vor feels a pang of sympathy. Ging had almost assuredly taken evasive maneuvers after being struck by the ship's first blast. Unfortunately, Ging, although considered fast, even among the Lenache, was nowhere near fast enough to avoid the defensive weapons fire of 3 automated snap cannons without a shield of any kind. Most of the remaining parts of Vor's servitor rest over 10 meters from the wreckage of the ship. Ah, Ging, Vor bemoans. Dependable till the very end, it seems the Lenache managed to lob his explosive bundle at the ship with the last of his strength. Then he was gunned down. If only you were less like your kind. Even among their proud race, Lenache warriors are a prideful caste. Their speed and agility legendary, and while few Lenache wear any clothes at all, the warrior caste looks down upon those that wear armor or use shields as slow, weak, and cowardly, regardless of the defensive practicalities. Vor glides over to the human ship, virtually invisible. The edges of his cutting physique move in and out of sight like faint lines drawn in the air, only to be erased just moments after. The darting pace of his 15 piercing eyes increases in response to the drama of the scene. An incredible amount of damage was done to Iardo's vehicle on the side of the ship closest to Vor's dead servitor. The little package Ging put together must have been powerful. The front half of the 40-meter ship was so damaged structurally that the weight of the not as damaged back half split the vehicle down the middle, causing the two halves to fall in on one another. A peal of thunder jolts Vor's mind away from his investigation. He instinctively breaks into a wide dispersion of fragmented perplexity. Having seen no lightning, he makes a brisk inspection of his surroundings, suspecting a secondary attack from the human, Iardo. A contingency plan in case the creature failed in its initial bid to destroy him. Anxious moments pass. Vor queries his satellites but finds nothing out of the ordinary. None of his surveillance systems alert him to any spaceborne threat. There are no transmissions at any of his local gates, and as of yet, no cloaked vehicles have been detected in Tissan's Eye or in orbit around it. With a lessened fear of immediate danger, Vor cyberpulses his surveillance system to access the chateau's visual feed of the landing pad. He cycles through a variety of filters to complement his investigation. Wait. An unusually dense reading of prime radiant waveform ripples among the charred remains of the human ship. Already poised for the action, Vor pulses his command cube for the status of his slip field. It is fully functional. An old sensory implant suppresses the field's atmospheric distortions, allowing Vor the full use of his natural and synthesized faculties. Vor returns to searching the area. The slow grind of blasted metal against blasted metal draws his attention. He instantly primes 6 weapons from his orbital array and amplifies his fractured distension to reduce the effectiveness of any attack. His 15 penetrating eyes scour the landing platform for the source of the disturbance. A small blackened piece of the vehicle wobbles, then rests, and a tortured wailing erupts from where the command center of the ship used to be. More curious than alarmed now, Vor accumulates along the planet's invisible lines of force in an oddly timed series of movements to coalesce above the wreckage of his former challenger's ship. The wailing reaches a fever pitch, then falters into a stuttering inhale, like a pause in the crying of a child. The inhale morphs into a horrible, gagging cough, then deteriorates into desperate choking, a progression with which Vor is intimately familiar. Atmospheric incompatibility. Most other species lack the environmental versatility of the Gixin Jail, an advantage Vor has exploited many times during his long career. The vitreous giant angles closer for a better look at the pain-ridden soul. "Drop your arms," Vor commands. Warped planes of bioluminescent signals flash in a bewildering display of lights and intensities. "I intend to assist you, but I will not do so if you initiate hostilities." More urgent gagging and desperate choking are his only answer. From the sound of it, the creature doesn't have much time. Vor homes in on his adversary's audible panic and sees it. Sayat Iardo. The human had made it back to its ship somehow, but was devastated by the journey. Its soft, tan flesh had fused in a myriad of ways with its armor and with some of the surrounding damaged parts of the ship. Now, its body fluids squirt and pump freely into the air. Its armor protrudes at unintended angles through its limbs, and there's the strange placement of that meaty, dark red thing. Vor recalls his human anatomical studies. Setting aside the obscurant nature of human clothing and armor, he is certain this unfortunate creature's organs are not where they should be. "A resonant transmission?" Vor questions slowly as the thought occurs to him. He remembers the peal of thunder and becomes certain that it is so. The thunderous shockwave must have been the result of the failed PRF. Iardo must have had a crew gate in the ship's command center, which was still partially functioning despite the ship's ruined condition. The human must have also had a portable PRF device of some sort on its person. That device must have been damaged in some way, or the circumstances of course. Vor has no way of knowing for certain, but he surmises that being subjected to the spinning of the room complicated the device's functioning. Additionally, the damage it had to have sustained by the tumbling furniture was quite probably a major factor in the failure of the transmission. So, this was the creature's alternate strategy then. To teleport to the ship if it needed to escape, or if it needed more leverage during their duel. The idea was a clever one, but it relied too much on the ship being an inviolable asset. Careless. The human had traded a clean, certain death at the core of Tissen's eye for this ignoble end. Vor returns his attention to his fallen challenger. Iardo's entire form shudders continuously from the shock of the failed transmission. One eye throbs under a thick red film as the other lolls around in its socket while Iardo's brain struggles to cope with its suddenly mangled body. Internal organs lie exposed to the elements, melded with the armor's EVA suit, and gagging and choking, Iardo's lungs angrily reject the very air they desperately want to breathe. Poor human. A single shot from Vor's AR laser blaster vaporizes the flesh of Iardo's top half. Her lower body spasms with the last of her trauma and then lies still. Vor hovers over the spot as he wishes the unfortunate creature a peaceful journey. After a few minutes to respectfully allow for the passing of Iardo's spirit, he reduces his magnetic alignment and slowly descends to inspect the human's body and its destroyed ship. The presence of the mobile PRF device disturbs him. It is highly unlikely the human was able to obtain a portable, Gillith-grade device such as this on its own initiative. It is more likely that the human, Iardo, was the agent of another, some other being with power, influence, connections, and/or wealth. Very unsettling. Sifting through the bombed-out wreckage of Iardo's ship proves fruitless, and whatever remains of the portable PRF device is so warped and mangled and blended with the human's body that it's impossible to recover any meaningful leads from its construction. Unfortunately, as evidenced by today's duel with Iardo, there are a great many beings still living that would love nothing more than to see Vor killed. Far too many to begin blindly speculating about which one it could be, and far too many, Vor is certain, that have yet to make themselves known. A dull light skips among his pains. He will just have to continue with his plans to rebuild, and hope his pursuer's next agent leaves a useful clue.